Checking in on the Israeli war against Hamas, the UN humanitarian agency says unimpeded access would have allowed for the delivery of at least 386,400 liters of fuel in January. Instead, Israel allowed access for fuel deliveries in northern Gaza only twice in January, with a single hospital receiving just 34,400 liters and the other facilities remaining without fuel. Among the planned convoys that were not facilitated, there were 13 consecutive access denials for deliveries to water and wastewater pumping stations. Meanwhile, aid missions departing from Gaza's southernmost governorate of Rafah in January increasingly had their access denied to areas north of Wadi Gaza, where coordination with the Israeli army is required, according to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The UN agency says out of the 61 planned missions to the north, only 10 were facilitated by the Israeli authorities, 2 were partially facilitated, 34 were denied access, and 6 were rescheduled by aid organizations due to internal operational constraints. And U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel seeking a truce deal to bring the war in Gaza to a halt. Mr. Blinken has held in Egypt and Qatar, both mediating between Hamas and Israel. He will be meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Isaac Herzog, among others, to discuss the Palestinian group's response to the proposed deal. Hamas has said previously that any deal must bring about a definitive end to the war. Israel has said it will not halt the war permanently until Hamas is destroyed. And speaking of a deal with Hamas, the militant group has laid out a series of demands, including exchanging hostages for Palestinian prisoners and rebuilding Gaza in response to an Israel-backed ceasefire proposal. The armed group wants a full withdrawal of Israeli forces and an end to the war after 3 45-day truce periods. Well, the offer is likely to be unacceptable to Israel's Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu, who has called for a total victory in Gaza. The question is whether a middle ground can be reached to move the process on. Hamas's response is a counter-offer to a ceasefire proposal backed by Israel and the U.S. and mediated by Qatar and Egypt, and details of which have not been made public just yet.